back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. As you probably know by the title of this video, we finally bought our dream house in Norway. Right now we're making the final preparations to move into our house from our little apartment, and I couldn't be more excited. This entire process has taken us months and months of research, preparations, and planning, as well as a ton of documentation. This was very daunting to us as first-time homeowners, and especially to me as somebody who is not originally from Norway and didn't really know what I was getting myself into. Since I was so unfamiliar with the process of purchasing property in Norway, I thought it would be a good idea to make this video if you're like me and thinking of moving to Norway in the near future, or already live here and want to buy a house or an apartment someday. So without further ado, this is the story of how we bought our house in Norway and how you can buy property in Norway if that's something you're interested in the future. Now, the first thing we did was research and preparation. Also important to note, during our research phase, we used the main Norwegian website to look at houses. This was finn.no. This site has everything you could possibly look for when looking at properties in Norway, and you can filter on so many things, including price, location, size of the building, age, etc. Now, months and months before we seriously started looking into buying a house, we decided to get a feel for the market, and did so by scrolling through dozens of houses in neighborhoods that we were interested in moving to. Not only were we scrolling through current listings, but we also decided to look at houses that had sold in these areas within the last 3 years. This really gave us a good idea of what the market was looking like over the last couple of years and what was considered a good price versus a bad price in certain areas. It was also just a really good idea to figure out what neighborhoods we should even be looking at in the first place, because there are so many things you need to consider when buying a home that's going to be your forever home. For our situation, we were looking at things like schools, distance to grocery stores, distance to public transportation, what our commutes to work would look like if we lived in certain areas, if there was any nature nearby, like forests or hiking trails that we could go to on the weekends, a lot of different things to consider. We even looked at the neighborhood plans to see if they had any plans to expand the neighborhoods in the near future, because nobody really wants to move into a construction site. During our research phase, we did more than just scroll online. Because we already lived here, we also took some weekends to drive around some of these neighborhoods that we were interested in, even if no specific house was on the market yet. This was just a way for us to figure out what places we would like to view versus what neighborhoods we knew just weren't going to be a good fit for us, so that we didn't waste our time in the future. In the end, after doing months of research online and driving around neighborhoods in real life, we walked away with the following information: what kind of houses were in our budget, what kind of neighborhoods we would be interested in moving to, and a general knowledge of the housing market and what it has looked like over the last 3 years. In addition to all of our research, we also assembled a lot of documentation during this phase. First and foremost was our finansieringsbevis, which is a letter that you get from a Norwegian bank that pre-approves you for a loan during the housing hunting process. Now, you can choose any Norwegian bank you would like, but it's a good idea to shop around for different interest rates and loan durations before making a final decision. Now, not only does this document let you know what you would qualify for when purchasing a home, but it is also a required piece of paper before you're even allowed to participate in any bidding rounds for apartments or houses in Norway. When you are applying for your finansieringsbevis, it is important to know that the bank will be doing a lot of research on you into your savings, incomes, and assets that you might have, as well as any debt you might have incurred. Also, when applying for your finansieringsbevis, you should expect to give the bank at least 2 to 3 of your most recent payslips, your latest tax returns, an overview of all of your assets, as well as an overview of all of your debt, proof of your savings, and any kind of customer identification, which is usually your D number that you get when you move to Norway, as well as a passport or a permanent residence card. We managed to go through our entire finansieringsbevis application process through a bank in Norway, all online. This was also followed up by a phone call to the loan officer at the bank, where we had to clarify some of our savings and assets, which we did by sending over some screenshots of our bank accounts. After all of this, we only had to wait about 3 business days before we received the finansieringsbevis over email. Once we received our finansieringsbevis, it was also valid for the next 3 months. If we hadn't purchased a home or apartment during that time, we would need to reapply for our finansieringsbevis to continue the search. Before you get too excited with the maximum amount you qualify for in your finansieringsbevis, it's important to consider extra costs that aren't covered in that letter. Things like maintenance costs or utilities. Which is why it's always a good idea to never buy what you maximum qualify for, which is what we also did in our case. Another very important thing to keep in mind is that Norway has very strict lending rules that usually require buyers to put down at least 10% in the down payment when you purchase a home. Now, once we had finished our preliminary research and assembled all of our required documentation, it was now the fun part of hunting for a home, the viewings. Now that we were seriously looking for a house, we started favoriting our favorite houses on fin.no and looked to see when they were doing their public viewings. We happened to get very lucky in our process because the first house we attended a viewing for ended up being our dream home and is where we're going to be moving to in a few months. The way we scheduled our viewing was through the fin.no site. Anyone who is listing their home for sale on fin.no is usually working through a realtor, but even when you're on the fin.no website, you can still see all the realtor's information on that web page. All you have to do to attend a viewing is to scroll down and click a button that says sign up for a viewing, or if they've already pre-scheduled a viewing, you can sign up to attend that one. This will usually redirect you to the realtor's website where you can contact them directly about the viewings. Another important thing to consider before even attending the viewing is to read through the inspection report about the home and prepare a list of questions to ask the realtor during the viewing. Norway is a little different than a lot of other countries in the sense that the sellers of the home pay for an inspection report, and this is available to anyone who is attending a viewing of their home. Buyers are also allowed to order a third-party inspection of the home, but in our case, we just relied on the third-party inspection that the sellers had purchased. After reading the inspection report, we prepared the following questions to ask the real estate agent when we were at the viewing. We wanted to address any red or yellow areas that were flagged by the inspector in the report and make sure that everything was in order. We asked about when the latest renovations were done. We also asked about how old the electrical system was and if there was any water or mold damage in the building. We also asked about any foundational issues or any issues with the roof. And of course, we had to ask about what appliances were included in the home as well as the energy rating of the home, as this would drastically impact our electrical prices every month. And to conclude our questionnaires of the real estate agent, we also covered what our monthly costs would look like, what the neighborhood was like, how long the property had been on the market, why the sellers were selling, and for extra good measure, we also took photographs of all of the things that had been flagged in the inspection report for future reference. After we attended the viewing and had questioned the real estate agent, we decided to participate in the bidding round. In our case, we got very lucky. The property had already been sitting on the market for a few months and there was absolutely no competition. We were basically the only really interested people that had showed up to our viewing, so we knew we could take our time with our bidding round. It also helped to know that the sellers really wanted to sell the house as soon as possible to move on to their next location, and that the selling season in Norway was coming to a close. In Norway, the peak selling seasons are spring and summer, and in our case, it was approaching fall when we bought the home. Since the sellers were using a real estate agency to sell the home, we had to submit our bid through their website. Bids are legally binding and cannot be withdrawn, so it is very important that you are serious when submitting any kind of bid on an apartment or a house. In our bid, we wrote down the price that we were willing to pay for the property, as well as the date we would like to move in, and were able to submit any conditions about the sale or comments we wanted to write to the sellers. We also had to set a deadline for the sellers to respond. For our first bid, we gave them a 24-hour deadline. But if you're in a more competitive bid market, it's smarter to keep the deadline to respond very short. Once we had officially submitted our bid through the real estate agent website, the sellers now had 3 options to respond with. Either they could accept our bid, in which case we had now legally purchased the home. They could reject our bid, in which case if we wanted to proceed, we would have to submit a new bid all over again, or they could counteroffer with the bid. Now, when a seller counteroffers a bid that a buyer has put in, it gets a little complicated legally speaking. Think about it this way. Bids are legally binding, and so are counteroffer bids that sellers might submit to that buyer. For example, if a buyer submitted a low bid and the seller decided to counteroffer that bid, that is now the legally binding price of that home. If a different person came in and decided that they wanted to buy the home at a higher price, the seller legally cannot sell that to them until the counterbid is either approved or rejected by the first buyer. This is why counterbids aren't really common if it is a very competitive bid market, because the seller wants to see what the other buyers are willing to offer them, and they don't want to be legally tied down by a lower counterbid that they might have submitted previously. But in our case, because there wasn't any other competition, there was nothing to lose by the sellers counteroffering our bid. It was also a pretty good situation for us because we knew there was no competition, and because we knew the sellers were eager to move, we were able to underbid by quite a lot and slowly negotiate back and forth with the sellers through the counterbid system until we landed on a final price that everybody was happy with. The entire bidding process took about 2 days. The first day was just because we gave them the 24 hours to respond, and the second day was filled with a lot of hours of back and forth counterbidding until finally we purchased our dream home. It went by in such a blur, but we are so excited that we did it, and we're very much looking forward to moving into our new home. Now, the next step after getting your bid accepted is the closing process and paperwork. After our bid was accepted, the real estate agent of the seller sent us over the paperwork. This included things like the purchasing price, details about the property, details about the move-in date, and all the conditions that we had included with the sale of the home. Things such as the sellers being required to do a professional cleaning of the building, or if we wanted to keep any of the appliances or furniture that came with the home. In our situation, and what is also very common in Norway, is that the date between you buying the home and having your bid accepted and the date when you move into the home is around 3 months. In our case, we purchased the home in the beginning of fall and aren't even going to be moving until winter time. Because of this standard 3-month waiting period between buying the house and moving in, it's no rush in submitting all of the finances to purchase the home. So while we did sign the purchase agreement immediately after our bid getting accepted, us sending the funds to the bank wasn't expected until about a month before we moved in. After you've bought the home, signed the purchase agreement, and sent the money to the bank about a month before moving in, it's time for your overtakelse, or your move-in date. This is a very simple process where you meet the real estate agent at the home you purchased to take over the keys and do a quick inspection. But other than that, the home is completely yours and ready to be moved into. And that is how we bought our dream home in Norway. In total, the entire process took about 6 months, which is broken down into about 2 months of research and document preparation, 1 month of doing serious research and attending the viewings, as well as doing the entire bidding process and signing paperwork, and then 3 months of waiting before we could finally move into our home. I'm so excited we got to do this, and I'm very much looking forward into moving into our dream house. If you have any more questions about purchasing property in Norway, I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. But anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time when we're moving into our house. Bye guys!